probably, this seems like a big setup because they don't even cover those issues. All they care about, white, black, black, white.
Yes.
What color, color. That's all you see.
What do you think about Obama's response to this? Basically, I've heard him say a couple of things. Number one, he wants more federal involvement.
I'm sure he does.
Okay, that's always a solution to everything, right? And then he wants to look at racial quotas and racial mixtures between the. So again, more federal government, and let's make this all simply about race.
Well, I found it interesting too that he gets Leslie McSpadden, you know, Michael Brown's mother, to go to the UN and talk about the militarized police and all that as well. I thought that was a very weird move, and I didn't really understand that. What did you think about that?
Well, you've got the federal government under its, I think it's Section 1033, where they're pushing all of this equipment onto local law enforcement. Really, really hard pushing on it. At the same time, this last summer, most people don't realize that they stopped a 60-year-old program to give surplus equipment to firefighters who really need that equipment. They don't. These are small rural departments that don't have the money to buy this, but they came up and said, we're not going to give that to you anymore because we're going to now enforce an EPA ruling that's 25 years old that we've never enforced before. They were more concerned about emissions from their military vehicles that didn't meet EPA specs than they were about the pollution from the forest fires. I mean, it was clearly, you know, a ridiculous rationalization, and they got political support because firefighters get organized, so they got that rescinded. But you can clearly see in that the police are, that the federal government is desperate to militarize the police, to equip them, as well as the training that we're talking about. They want to put that militarized equipment in their hands. That, in and of itself, makes them approach the public differently.
And then, you know, the statement, we gave it to them, but we didn't think they would actually use it. Yeah. And we don't just see this in Ferguson. I believe it's Ohio State has MRAPs now. School systems in San Diego have MRAPs now. So it's a growing trend, you know, from the biggest cities to the smallest. Podunk, sheriff's departments, police departments are gearing up with all this type of gear. And like you said, they have the training or the lack thereof to use these things properly. Do they need them at all in some cases? You know, the initial days kind of in Ferguson, you know, I understand you had the riots and the looting and the burning buildings, they burned down the Quick Trip and all that, but it wasn't deployed for that. It was deployed for the peaceful demonstrators who were out there in the street that the police had blocked off, because you see so much in the MSM, the rioters or the mob or whatever they want to call them, have the streets blocked off. Back in August, the police had those streets blocked off from both ends, and the people just got in the middle. So they said, well, the street's blocked off. We might as well just get out here and do what we want to do. So, you know, it's the training, it's the shoot first tactics, it's the brutalizing tactics, the intimidation tactics. This is what's fueling a lot of the animosity towards the police.
Now, we're almost out of time, but before we leave, two things I want to look at. And number one, we see over and over again, just as we saw the fellow who was shot in between the riots in August and what just happened, we saw the fellow shot in Walmart because he had a BB gun. Some guy called it in to 911. They failed to return an indictment there. We see this happening over and over again. We usually don't get to see what happens. We say, how could they possibly do something like that? Well, here's some glimpse as to how they can possibly do something like that. As people have gone through this document dump that was designed to deliberately bury any relevant information in a mountain of useless stuff, some people have already uncovered some of these things. Let me just read a few of these to you real quickly. Wilson washed away any evidence of blood. The first officer to interview Wilson failed to take any notes. He said, well, I didn't take notes because at that point in time, I had multiple things going on in my head. Besides what Darren was telling me. He didn't take any notes. He didn't record it with his recording machine. The investigators failed to measure the distance between Brown and Wilson. And I've heard Fox commentators saying, well, he was only 10 feet away. You know how quickly somebody that's 6'4" can close a 10-foot distance? No, they were also saying that it was 150 feet away. So what was it? Was it 10 feet? Was it 150 feet? They didn't think it was very important. He says, somebody shot somebody. This is what they came out in the grand jury. The guy says, somebody shot somebody. There was no question as to any distance or anything of that nature the time I was there. Not relevant. It is relevant, okay? Investigators did not test Wilson's gun for fingerprints. He said there was a struggle going on, right? And that he lost control of the gun. But he didn't have the gun. Well, Brown's fingerprint should have been all over the gun.
All
they
over
didn't test it. He wiped it clean, okay? And Wilson did not immediately turn his weapon over to investigators after killing Brown, and on and on. An initial interview with investigators was delayed while he traveled to the hospital. He told he testified that he didn't really feel like he needed to be in the hospital because his wounds weren't significant. And when you look at the pictures, no, they weren't. So you see this type of thing happening over and over again, and we see from the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights that is exactly the type of thing that happens over and over again.
Oh, yeah, and just speaking about the distance between Darren and Mike Brown, you know, he said he had the initial confrontation where Mike reached in the window and they were struggling over the gun. He said he tried to fire the gun and he had his hand jammed in the trigger guard, in the trigger guard, and he couldn't fire it. You know, this is all relevant information, particularly when you're talking about the fingerprints. And then, you know, he does the interview with, Stephanopoulos, and he says Mike was about, 35 feet away, but the prosecutor said he's about 150 feet away. You know,
that makes a huge difference.
That's a big difference.
If you got an unarmed man and he's 150 feet away, that's a big difference versus, 35 feet or versus 10 feet.
You know, especially a guy the size of Mike, a guy 6'4", almost 300 pounds. He's not, the fastest guy on the planet.
The system is lying to us. The system is covering stuff up. But at the same time, it's also lying to the police. And one of the things that it's lying about is their risk on the street. They tell them with the killology course that I just talked about that's being taught in Albuquerque that it's a war zone. There's people out there that don't want you to go home and see your family tonight. You have to take care of them before they get you. Pushing that narrative all the time. Is that really true? No. We have an article here from Zero Hedge. A recently published FBI report accidentally proves that while the police claim cops face growing threats from a rowdy population, the opposite is true. Now, this is what they found. They found that they had 76 law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty in 2013. 27 of those were felonious, in other words, involved with a gun or a struggle, okay? Half of them, the rest of them, were killed in accidents, like automobile accidents. And they say half of those were officers who weren't wearing their seatbelts that they regularly ticket people for. So you see that you've got, in most of these cases, it is not that they're in that high a danger, especially when you look at the number of police officers who are killed versus the number of people that they do kill. It is way out of proportion.
Yeah, definitely agree on that.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing to see how they've handled this entire situation. You know, when you go out there and you point guns at people, you come out in riot gear. You know, that, to me, that goes, okay, you want to start something.
Yeah.
You know, and then when you have these outsiders out here, these agitators, I mean, all that does is just fuel that battle.
And it's the rules of engagement that they're pushing on them. To sum things up, he's got two summaries here. He says, first thing we learned from looking at these statistics is that police are schizophrenic in their belief that they're in danger, okay? The statistics do not bear it out, but that's what they're being told in their training. That's what they're being told by their supervising officers. He says, second, we see that militarization is working for the police. He says the number of people that the police kill every year, tenuously reported, claims around 400. This is already almost 15 times more than police who are intentionally killed. However, the 400 figure is a result of 17,000 local police agencies being allowed to self-report. So they don't even collect the statistics for most of these people. That's exactly what Serpico has said.
Oh, yeah. And you're talking about the training these guys get. We can wrap it up, going towards the no hesitation targets that Paul did the articles about. Whether it's, some old guy with a shotgun, a little boy with a little pistol, it's speaking about the young man with the BB gun. It's this kind of training that anybody's a potential threat. Okay, maybe somebody does have a gun or something that looks like a gun. Let's get out. Let's see if we can defuse the situation, even if you have to draw on them for your own personal safety. Do you have to shoot a child after immediately hopping out of a car? Speaking of the 12-year-old.
So, yeah, that's the way we would wrap this up is to tell police officers that for your own good, for the sake of the community, for the sake of the country, you need to understand that you're being fed a line that really isn't true about the danger that you're facing out there. We understand that you're operating in a dangerous environment, but at the same time, we see police officers in Alaska, rural Alaska, where they're not armed, in a report saying that their most effective tool is their mouth, being smart about how they engage people, not being provocative. Understand that you're being manipulated by the federal government, the same people that are now saying that because of what happened in Ferguson, as they deliberately, with their policies, with the judicial system that they failed to justify what they were doing, those same people, as they build up tensions, are now saying that we need to focus more on race and we need to have more federal involvement. That is not the answer. Well, that's it for tonight. Thanks for joining us. If you're watching this on YouTube, please remember to subscribe to our channel. And if you're not a subscriber to Prison Planet TV, it's a way that you can support our operation, a way that you can send reporters like Jakari and Joe on these trips to get firsthand information, to see firsthand what the mainstream media is not telling you. Right now, we have a holiday special on INFOWARS, so check that out. We'll be back tomorrow at 7 Central, 8 p.m. Eastern.
Celebrate the spirit of freedom and liberty upon which our nation was founded at InfoWarsShop.com. Molon Lave is ancient Greek for come and take it. This popular design combines both classic Greek Spartan imagery with modern M16 assault rifles. Now available in women's tees and proudly made in the USA. Celebrate the spirit of 1776 with the George Washington brass belt buckle or this incredibly sharp-looking 1776 hat. Badass. And be sure to check out the new arrivals at InfoWars Life, where you can prepare your body to perform at peak levels with Survival Shield, Nascent Iodine, Super Male Vitality, and Fluoride Shield. And wake up, America. Immune Support Blend is the healthy choice for the gourmet coffee lover. So get incredibly high-quality, freedom-based products and help fund the revolution at InfoWarsShop.com.
You are watching the InfoWars Nightly News, which airs 7 p.m. Central at InfoWarsNews.com. Members can share their passcodes with up to 11 other people, and your support is helping us defend liberty worldwide.